Hello, everybody. Dave from EA Rejects here with another NBA Jam video. And my last few videos have been about secret and hidden characters. And so I thought maybe I can do something with the developers where we talk about those hidden characters and secret characters. There's been so much media done on the history of NBA Jam. And so this video is all about the playable characters and most of them working at Midway at the time. And we'll get some great stories from behind the scenes. I want to welcome in two of the great designers of NBA Jam, Mr. Mark Turmell and Mr. Sal DiVita. There you guys are.
Happy to be here.
Live from California. Is that where you guys are?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in San Diego, and Sal, you're in Orange County now.
Yeah, I'm in Orange County now. Just moved here like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. Still, my house is still empty. Haven't even really unpacked. Although I did find a few things as I was unpacking. I found some of the original tapes that we shot the basketball players for NBA Jam.
Oh, is that right?
Wow.
Like the tapes that we recorded our high eight.
All right.
That's amazing that those are still so accessible, readily accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, high eight with blue shorts on a blue screen.
Blue screen, blue shorts. Yep.
and of course, I've seen those videos where you guys talk about how it wasn't the best to be blue on the blue screen and things like that. And I know a lot of people have seen with the resurgence of NBA Jam, I feel like in the past decade, all the footage and all the kind of stories that Sports Illustrated did, things like that. What I want to do today is take you through the pretty much hidden characters in the game, right? You guys kind of revolutionized things, I thought, in the arcade. I think that developers early on, maybe they put their initials in as high scores on like a Galaga or something like that when they shipped, and you had to beat them. But you guys took it a step further. You guys had an initial system and a birthday system that made everybody kind of be able to make their unique character and save it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that came to be, that you guys would have that kind of system and then actually put yourselves in the game?
Yeah, I can touch on that. We thought we were actually kind of going overboard at the time. This is before the internet. And so there weren't, you couldn't Google secret codes, things like that. It was only in the magazines. And in fact, some cabinets, some operators would put like secret codes on the side of a cabinet. So at the time, we knew that secret codes were, starting to come out in the different console games. But we thought we were kind of going overboard with it, with the amount of little, nuanced, big head modes and speed up and, all these things. But it got to the point where we were arguing internally on the team who was the best player. And, instead of writing it down on a piece of paper or a chalkboard, we put in this system where you could enter your initials, enter your birth date or a code. And with that code, it would recall, your progress and your record. And so it was really kind of a competitive, circumstance that triggered it initially. But of course, it makes sense. The coin-operated games have like a CMOS battery-backed up, chunk of RAM that would survive even when you'd pull the plug on the machine, as long as you had a battery in there. And so it was really, I think, just common sense to store away a record and an ID.
Yeah, and it also had another effect where it made people loyal to that particular machine. So they would have their record stored on that machine, and they would want to come back to that machine and keep building up their record. And we gave like a lot of different avenues for you to have bragging rights for. So like, most played games or anything like that. So people would keep coming back to try to like get whatever category they could where they could raise on the tier list and end up on the screen somewhere. So
yeah, that was really smart. That's a good point, Sal. That was really smart. We had, rebounding and 3-point shooters, and you would have to, click, 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 and there's a lot of leaderboards.
Right.
And of course, in today's day and age, leaderboards are still critical. That was 26 years ago, but today, I'm in conversations multiple times a week about leaderboards and the importance and what to apply leaderboards to.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were a little bit ahead of the curve, I think, adding all those leaderboards back then.
Yeah, I mean, it just added to it because I feel like you guys hit NBA Jam at like the golden age of basketball players, with the duos and everything. And then that leaderboard system, I do remember clicking over and over on that before even putting in any money to see who was at the top, if my name was in there. And like you said, different high scores you could get. So that was pretty cool.
I remember, Sal, I think there was a debate about should we do a most games played leaderboard. And I remember saying, hey, they paid the money. We should give them, the recognition.
Yeah. It felt a little dirty at first. We're like, no, they paid the money. Like if you put the most money in there, you should have a spot on the leaderboards.
Oh yeah, we have in our games nowadays, paid leaderboards all over the place.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, let me get to just a few questions before we get into actually showing the characters, all the hidden characters from NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and Hangtime. I noticed that like some of the characters are like bigger in size. Like Mark, you're pretty tall in the game, and then some people seem rather short. And I wondered if you kind of base that on people's actual heights in the company, like if you paid too much attention to that, and also if the character stats were based on if people were good at basketball in real life or not in the company.
Yeah. I mean, we did try to simulate the people on the team. I remember, John Carlton, who's, I don't know, he's maybe 5'5" or something.
Not 5'5".
Yeah. But I remember the first time, he saw, his representation, he wasn't really happy. He's like, dude, I'm bigger than that. And he was kind of proud of his kind of basketball skills, and he was tough. I mean, he's a shorter kind of a guy, but he's pretty stout. Yeah, he was thick.
So did you make him like fast with quick hands, or did you kind of try to give how did you come up with even the stats for each person's player?
Oh, those were directly correlated to how much they pissed Mark off that week.
I was just going to say that.
That's awesome.
It depends on the day of the week when we were doing stuff.
That's right. So those fluctuated all the way up until the day we sent the ROMs over. Those changed, and one person in particular, who shall be nameless, that poor guy pissed Mark off the wrong time, and it cost him his stats that week.
now people are going to be. People are going to be now when one of their creative players isn't very good, they're going to be like, that's the guy they were talking about.
That guy must have pissed Mark off, that's for sure. Most of the team members, though, it didn't really correlate to how good we really were. We were all stacked pretty well, but there was something that we maybe stood out in a little bit here and there. Mark never really told anybody what all the stats were. I'm sure he's 10s at everything, and I'm sure that everybody else is probably a couple points off here and there, but he made pretty much everybody pretty good. We're all, I think, better than any other NBA player. Is that incorrect, Mark?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's basically true. And you guys gave me a hard time. I mean, you guys did look at the numbers, over my shoulder, the stats. So it wasn't too crazy between any of us.
Yeah. And then also another thing worth noting was, at some point, how the heads even got into the game, how we even did our own faces and stuff, is an interesting story, because at first getting the NBA players' heads into the game, you may have heard that whole process of looking for references in magazines, watching videos and freeze framing, getting all the different angles. And then at one point we discovered, okay, these are all the different angles that we need. That'd be great if we had these people here. Now we've got our angle set, we can just capture them in, you know, a few minutes and have it into the game in a relatively quick thing. And then we even did a test with that. And it's like, look, we can even put ourselves in the game. And we did all that, you know, in a camera that we were using to shoot all the other motion video. And then we're like, you know, why don't we put our heads in the game? Why don't we put ourselves in the game? So we started with just a couple of us, and it turned out funny, like we were amused by it. And then we go, well, that didn't take very long at all. And so we like, hey, who else helped out on the game? And we started just like inviting people to come into the studio. We shot everybody's head. And then very quickly, because it was all digitized, we didn't have to hunt for anybody's thing. Our process was so quick that we just were getting people's heads into the game, you know, at a pretty quick pace. So that's how we even got, you know, to the point where we put ourselves in. It was just easy to do.
Yeah. It's interesting too that, you know, David, you're probably familiar with this. The leagues nowadays, NFL, NBA, they do, you know, they'll do like facial scans of players. And back in those days, we of course had to go to, you know, VHS tapes, and we're trying to find, you know, people dunking the ball and, you know, silly things. But we requested to the NBA to get these, you know, headshots. They did have regular kind of mug shots, you know, front view, roster type shots that they would give to the press. But the following season, they actually did start to do, you know, side view and facing up, and we got that for tournament edition. But it was kind of, you know, haphazard. Some teams did it, some teams didn't. And, you know, some of the players would be, you know, I'm not going to show you the top of my head. I'm not, you know, so it was a little bit shoddy what we got, but they started making an effort. And then of course, once, you know, the larger, you know, the EA type companies got involved with their NBA titles, then I think it became a little bit more organized and professional in getting all the content.
So did you have to like talk people into around the office being in, or did they like, you know, line up and they really wanted to be in, or did you like put people in that didn't even know they were going to be in? Like, oh
no, everybody knew that they were going to be in, and we asked. It was basically everybody was excited about being in a video game, and who wouldn't be? Especially it was the people that, you know, we were all a tight knit group back then, and everybody contributed to the making of the game in one way or another. And sometimes we just kind of like gifted, you know, hey, you want to be in as a yuck, you know, because, you know, I don't know, because you did this or whatever. And so we, people were very excited about being in our game. And once they saw themselves in there, of course, they couldn't help, you know, they couldn't.
Yeah, and I think Midway paid what, like $100 a person or something.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, you know, everybody had to sign a waiver, and there had to be compensation.
That's awesome. $100 at the game company. That'd be great.
Yeah.
It might have been $1. It was either 100 or 1.
Yeah, right. Was this even for Jam, or this is after Jam when the lawyers got involved? Because I don't think we even told anybody what we were doing.
Yep.
Just a few like very minor detail questions. When you put in your code for your birthdays for a developer, you hear the nail in the coffin or Boomshakalaka. Did anybody like custom pick those, or were those just thrown in by the sound guy? Do you guys know anything about that?
We know it wasn't random. We did assign specific sounds, but I think it was just, you know, probably, you know, me at the last minute just kind of throwing in different samples that we had. We should have been a little bit more, you know, clever with that. But it was just a nice little add.
Yeah. And my last little question is, for some reason, like a record would show up, like maybe Mark, you'd put in your code and it'd say no record, and you'd get to start off from scratch with your character, where maybe you put in Sal's and it says 14 and 11 and it'd have like stats. What was kind of the difference in that? Was that just kind of a random thing?
That was a bit of an argument on the team as well. The game had, you know, all those different high score tables, and those are kind of hard-coded tables based on the records that we stored, you know, on these, you know, on that CMOS battery backed up, you know, memory. And so we distributed ourselves throughout the different leaderboards, and some of the guys just, you know, kind of didn't make the cut in terms of being there at the right time to get inserted onto the list. so many things going on at that time. I don't know everybody's initials and all this kind of stuff. And so it was really just, hey, let's fill out this table. Let's throw in some of the people that we have. And so some of the people that we shot the headshots for, the secret characters, they just didn't have a record inside that battery backed up list.
Very good. Well, let's get into the characters, shall we? Hopefully, we'll all be starting here with basically an image of you two from the first two iterations of the NBA Jam Arcade. You guys have any kind of stories about working together that you want to share, or can you tell me? I guess Sal, can you tell me your kind of role on the team at this point?
Yeah. I came in as a stripper. I came in as an image stripper, where basically taking frames of animations that were recorded on the blue screen with the blue, outfits and whatever, and picking out the best frames for each particular move, and then trimming them out, stripping them out from the background. So with pixel by pixel, basically drawing an outline around every frame, and then colorizing the background out so it dropped out. And then we had, and then tinting the edges of the flesh and reconstructing the edges of the flesh where things, where it got too blown out by the videotape or by the blue or something, and just basically retouching and reconstructing every frame of animation. I started with that, and then I also did a lot of the the colorful UI for the game. And I think I did most of the UI for the game, if not all of it. And then
like the stuff behind me.
Yeah, behind you, and then even in the game as well. And I was trying to reproduce, at least in the game, reproduce what we saw on television. As we watched it, we were trying to get a TV style look. And I'm like, oh, it looks so cool. It wouldn't be that hard to reproduce that. So with the colors that we had, our hardware system was so good. We had what could look like, millions of colors on the screen, even though we had palletized images, 256 colors for any particular object, but we could do 256 palettes with multiple objects of 256 images. So we could get this super great color resolution on screen. So I tried to go beyond this look of like the 16 color, dithered patterns that you'd see on most games, and got smooth gradients and smooth metallic effects, and tried to really work with textures, like in the background there with the wood, just to show off the color range that we had for this hardware. So, and then also playing the game and suggesting stuff and animating stuff, hand animating, hand tweaking stuff. That was mostly my responsibility.
Yeah, I can say that, when Sal came in onto the project, it was just an incredible win for us. It was like a breath of fresh air. He was so full of energy, still full of energy today, really, improves anything he touches. Whatever game business he's in, he's going to improve it. And the things that really popped out to me were, immediately, of course, improving the heads, improving the animations, choosing good frames to use for dunks, making the UI. I didn't even know until he had been there for, a couple of months that, he could do this UI stuff, and all of a sudden he starts making it look more, broadcast.
Right.
He was, whatever he could do to help, he would go and plug EEPROMs into our test arcades and, watch the players and come back with, the response of different, activities. So he's kind of the jack of all trades, certainly focused on art, but then has the game design sense and the energy to solve other problems.
And just real quick, you guys are probably both in the crowd, right? Like in game, you guys are standing up and you kind of do your animations. Did everybody line up and do that all at once, or was that individuals put beside each other?
Individuals.
Okay.
We just shot them all individually, and then Tony Goski did most of that work. So we shot them all, and then Tony would paint over them to make them fit the environment properly. Tony did all of our environments, our court, the crowd, and a lot of other stuff involved.
I'll have to not get on any sidetracks because I know we're going to go by Mr. Goski here in a minute. So let's go to the next guy. We have John Carlton up next, and he looks like he's changed quite a bit from NBA Jam to Tournament Edition. there.
Yeah, he was the original hipster, that's for sure. Like during jam. But John Carlton was an artist as well. He's actually one of the original artists on the team. He paved the way for how all the digitization was being done. John and I had worked together at a company before Midway, and then John got there, I think, just ahead of me, and started working on Jam right away. And he was the person, I think, that was very technical. He was the one that was in charge of how the digitization process, the quality of it, working with the cameras, the lighting, working with the shoots in the shot, whatever, in the studio, and then he also was a basketball fan, a huge basketball fan.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, basketball fan.
Yeah,
basketball fan. Yeah, I love John. This picture, looking at what you put up here, I remember distinctly when he did that second shot. I was like, damn, how did you make yourself look so good? Like, he like really put a lot of time into the lighting and, the touch up and, so I said, hey, you got to spend some more time on the other guys. I remember that debate now. Not a debate, but, it's kind of a funny conversation. Like, hey, how come you look so much better than everybody else?
That's fantastic. Well, let's go on to the next guy. We have Mr. John Hay.
Oh, yeah, John. Look at that. John is, he's so funny. He's the master of all of the audio that we put together. He directed Tim Kitzrow on the VO and the Boomshakalakas. He's the guy on the team that lost the most money gambling on this game.
Here we go. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And no, really, John would, it would be, we worked long hours. So it could be 10 o'clock at night. And I would, ping him up on, the phone, because he was across the street in another building in this like little, sound studio.
The pinball building.
Yeah, we didn't have email. So I'd pick up the phone. I'd say, man, I'm just, this slap sound just, doesn't work. It's, doesn't sound good. It's not loud enough, or whatever the sound effects were. And he'd go, okay. And, he would, put the phone down and go back to work. And, a couple hours later, he'd come over and say, here, try these. And so he was like, whatever he could do to keep on propelling the game forward, kind of without complaint even. And so he's great.
He looks like a great guy to work with from the picture. I mean, both pictures are just classic pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a professor now of at DePaul University with the topic of like video game audio, or
That's
music.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd like to give John some kudos on something else. If you think about it, I mean, before this, there's been sports games before this, and they always, they called out players' names and did whatever. But John pioneered this whole effort of recording different inflections for every character's name, for every situation, and every like tone of action. So Pippin, all these different things. And he had an idea of how he's going to stitch them all together, because they all had to get stitched in with the sentence, that was highlighting the name, or that came after the name. Mm-hmm. So he had built a system where all the stitching happened in the most seamless way at the time compared to any other game. It was the most, and that's one of the things that people probably don't realize, is that's one of the main draws to Jam, is it just feels so good in every way, including the audio. People repeat the audio sounds over and over again because both Kitzrow and the way Tim stitched things all together, and your enjoyment of the game it was almost transparent. Like you felt like you're playing a game because it was seamless. And that's all due to John's way of setting the process up and having the foresight to know all these different inflections and how they would play in after each sentence, and building the system with it. So that's John.
That is awesome. Yeah, I feel like you guys built the perfect sports game, almost like Back to the Future is a perfect movie. You guys just nailed it on every aspect. I mean, everything's just so clean and polished and fun.
Yeah, had all the right people, and then also Mark as well. So Mark was the person that was pushing for this perfection as well, and that's important. Like, because some people are just like, yeah, it works.
Right.
There are different methods, and I need to see it more now. Different methods of building things, and some people just like, yeah, we'll fix that later. We'll fix that later. We'll fix that later. But Mark's methodology is like, no, that sounds bad now, or that looks bad now. Let's fix it now. Like, none of this. Hey, let's just throw it in as a pass, and we'll fix it, later, because something else will always come up. Now let's build like this perfection slowly and keep on building perfection as we enlarge it and enlarge it. Let's not let this thing get out of hand, and then you've got a big mess, and you don't even know where to start cleaning it up. And then people look at it and play it and go, this is just a big mess. Don't ever show anything to anybody that doesn't look good. It always has to look good, even if you show less. Whatever you show needs to look good. And when you start showing crappy stuff, that's what people focus on, and that's bad. So that was a lot of Mark's direction.
That's awesome. So next up, we have Sean Liptak, which is one of my favorite players to play as.
He's the professor, man. He's the brainiac. Still making games today, by the way. He's a great engineer that was there from the beginning, and he did, kind of techie things right off the bat, like, the court skews back and forth. That's a 2D, hardware that NBA Jam had. And so he basically figured out a way to create one big 2D image and then take it line by line and skew it back and forth as, the ball would move left and right. The basketball physics, say, bouncing around on the rim.
I love that. Bouncing around on the rim is always awesome.
And it's really important to get right. And basketball games up to that point had never gotten it right. And so he did a lot of work on, the kind of the physics and the net and the bouncing, and then the AI. So he did the AI for, the non-human controlled players. And there are a lot of great stories around that. He's kind of this guy that likes to, be, really deep.
He's our mad scientist. He's a mad scientist.
Yeah, he's a mad scientist. And, he made the AI, too strong, and we had to dial it back. And, so it was, but we left it in. Anybody who's played NBA Jam, you'll probably recognize that at some point, the AI all of a sudden freaks out and it starts doing different stuff. Inbound the ball and the drone is backing up to, he's not going to guard you. And then sometimes he loses his mind and he comes in and steals the ball, even when it's the middle of the first quarter. There's a random roll of the dice where he'll snap into this other code that he did that was just too much, and we had to turn off. And so we went back to the old code and then turned that one on as a random wild hair.
Yeah, Sean's approach at developing AI was make it too perfect first. Like, make them do exactly what you want. Like, make them be able to kill a player, meaning like if you took a shot, they would respond. The first tick you start to go up, because they know everything that you do. They're reading button presses. They know everything you're doing. So the first tick you start to do something, boom, they're on you. They could totally be on you and destroy you anytime they want. And we're like, okay, Sean, that's great. But slow down, cowboy. You gotta realize what people have, like, mental lapses. They can't respond that quickly. You have to ease back.
Yeah.
So we talked Sean, back off that. But once in a while, like Mark said, they get wild hairs and they can be perfect for a little bit, and then they lean back. But that gives us our range. That's how we can do the different difficulties.
Yeah. I'm a cat, so I never want to throw anything away.
Right. Yeah, and the one thing too, Mark, is the physics on the ball. Something worth noting is that I still think about it today, the genius things about that was during, first of all, he knew exactly where the ball was going to go at any time. And many times he picked, when he wanted suspense to happen, he would pick trajectories. Like he did several projections to the rim, to the hoop. And he knew what each projection was going to do and what it was going to yield as far as like its bounce factor or its effect like on the rim. So during key like tense moments, like nail biter moments or whatever, you'll shoot, and sometimes the ball will like bounce on the rim like 4 or 5 times. That's no accident. That's happening to add drama. And that was like something that Sean was able to do. And Mark's like, no, like you got to put those in on those moments. That adds even more intensity and excitement to it.
Oh, the full court shot where it could bounce around the rim and it's good.
Yeah.
You know, that would be awesome. And of course they had the rainbow and it would go like way out of the screen.
Yeah. And that was all part of Sean's system of being able to project and detect what the ball was going to be doing way ahead of time before it even left anybody's hand, or maybe the ticket left somebody's hand. And then he chooses the right trajectory to get that result. So
that is fantastic.
Mad scientist.
Let's go ahead. We're going to move on to Tony Goski.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, one of our favorites. Tony, again, he was there really early on. An incredible artist, a true artiste.
Yeah.
He's a painter, as well as he's still working on Mortal Kombat today, isn't he, Sal?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, he's still in the business, still working there with the same group, working on Mortal Kombat. And so we were lucky to have him. He did a lot of the touch-up work on all of the heads. The VHS tapes for all the different NBA players, didn't really, provide a lot of good quality frames. And so he was there to try to improve the look of the game. He's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and Tony and I went to school together at the American Academy of Art. And so we knew each other. And I think he may have been the person who asked me to come to him, or John Carlton asked me to come to Midway. And Tony was, like Mark said, an oil painter. So he was doing illustrations and paintings of this really elaborate stuff. So we asked him, working on a sports game, he tried to, keep himself as like activated as possible, his art skills as activated as possible, because he's used to doing more fantasy type stuff. And that's where he came up with like working on making the court have like an oil painterly look to it, or a very interesting, realistic painterly look to it. The crowd, all the faces of the screens that you've got here, he's touching them up and improving everything. And then at one point, Mark, was he on Jam for the whole thing, or did he step off towards the end?
No, I think he was there till the end.
Till the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, because at one point he went to Mortal Kombat, but to do fantasy stuff, but he helped out tremendously. His style is a big part of why Jam looks the way it looks, is that quality of smoothness, is Tony touching everything to give it that look.
Awesome. All right, Jamie Rivet.
He's the one that texted me just a few minutes ago during this interview. I still work with him today. Worked with him on Smash TV before NBA Jam, all the way back to the 80s. And he's Australian, and he's an engineer, a great engineer, and he is the guy that kind of pioneered what we call, Sal and I, in the projects we've worked on, something called the LEAP Act, which essentially means, how do I go from point A to point B over X amount of time? And so, of course, for dunks, there was a system in place where we had to, get your wrist to the rim. And if you said, do that in 2 seconds, then, it's a normal looking dunk. If you do it in 4 seconds, then it's a higher dunk. And so he was kind of instrumental in the engineering of getting from point A to point B. And then perhaps maybe one of the toughest things to do in that game, or even any of these sports games, is to, when you pass the ball from one person to another person, we couldn't stop the momentum of that other player. That would be horrible. So the player has to continue along his trajectory. And so the player who's got the ball to begin with, he has to know, like, okay, he's here now, but I'm going to shoot it this way. And since I'm going to throw it over there, maybe I'll do a behind the back pass because I know where I'm facing and where he's going to be. And then it gets more complicated because what if the player that you're throwing it to is going to bump into the sideline? If he stops at the sideline, it's also bad for the player because then somebody comes up and knocks him down. So, they glance off. And so then that changes the trajectory of where I have to pass because he's going to glance off and be at a different spot. So it's very complex, passing football, basketball. And he was instrumental in a lot of that work.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a very strong gameplay programmer, we call him, and also tool.
Yeah, but one more thing. The on fire mode was Jamie and I walking to Burger King, during lunch, and I was lamenting that, the game is just missing something. It's just not fun enough. And he's the one that said, how about if we go into some kind of a fire mode where you get, an advantage? And so as we were eating lunch, we came up with the, make 3 shots in a row, be on fire with smoke, bump up your shot percentage, and then goaltend to give you, benefit on the defensive side of the ball, and then have it run out. So we actually designed all of that, all those, 4 or 5 bullet points there at lunch. And so, he always gets credit from me on the fire moment in the game.
What a productive lunch. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's to move on to George Petro. Is that how I would say that?
Yep,
Petro.
Yeah, George still making games today. He's partnered with Eugene Jarvis, the famous point-op designer.
Yep, he's coming up later. Yep.
Eugene is. And so George, another engineer, one of the early kind of engineering members of the Williams Electronics. Back there in the heyday, did NARC, the video game, Trog, Terminator 2, and then he moved on to work at his own company, Big Buck Hunter. You've probably seen in the arcades. Mm-hmm. He's done a lot of great work over the years, still making games. And he was just kind of one of the leaders in the studio. And so didn't really, wasn't involved with the game, but, tossed him that opportunity.
Nice. All right. Let's go to John Newcomer.
Yeah, Newcomer, still making games today. John is known for Joust. He was an early designer or artist on the Joust point-op game. John was there at the beginning of NBA Jam, trying to help with the, kind of the digitization process, both from filming to, trying to clean up those images. That was new technology back then. We had some special hardware, this target card that would, digitize images and put them on the screen for an artist to be able to touch up, trim out, as Sal had alluded to. So he was another kind of old-time Williams Electronics guy that had worked on NARC and then was on NBA Jam from the beginning.
And, out of all the game teams I ever got to QA on, he looks the most like the developers that I used to love. Like, he just got that look, that developer look, like a cool guy on the team. All right, let's move on to Sheridan Osler, which I used to use all the time. Osler?
Sheridan Osler. Yeah, and Sheridan revolutionized heads for all future games with that top hat. He came in with that top hat to our photo shoot when we told him we were going to shoot him, and had no idea like what he was doing, have no idea like why he's putting a top hat on. Like, okay, he's got a top hat. So we shot his angles, we shot his face, we put him in the game. And at the arcade, when people first saw that, because Sheridan was the one, he's the guy who like helped set up our hardware. He built our arcade machines for us, the test machines. He helped, put together, burn our ROMs for us and all that kind of stuff. Brought the games out to the locations and set them all up, made sure they were working and made sure that they, and then he would boot them up. And then of course, he starts playing his own head on test while we're there doing that. And the next thing you know, everybody's playing as Sheridan Nosler because they want to see that top hat. It was like a peacock. They just wanted to see something different about them than everybody else. And that peacock flair with the top hat is what Sheridan, brought to games forever.
Yeah, Sheridan, we always had a lot of good times with him, a lot of good stories. Sal, I think he passed away a couple of years ago, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, he was kind of a techie in the lab where, wiring up the control panels and, supporting the teams with whatever they needed, burning new EEPROMs, erasing EEPROMs, fixing cabinets.
All right, well, let's move on to another guy used all the time because his code was so easy, Air Morris, which was Willie Morris Jr.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. He's the star of the show. When we embarked on this, I went out, at lunch, I would drive around Chicago looking for, street basketball players that I could, gingerly approach and say, hey, you want to make some money? And so I found, Willie Morris Jr. He was at a Y on, like Clark and Division there in Chicago. And it was clear he had it was 3 guys playing ball. It was clear that he had some really good skills. He was dunking. He had a lot of that, a lot of flavor to what he was doing. And this is before we even knew that we were going to turn this into an NBA game. Initially, it was like, hey, let's start digitizing basketball players to make a basketball game. And so we brought him in. He started, doing moves. We recorded him right from day one. There were 3 actors, three ballers. And he was the standout. And then eventually we had to, cut his head off,
Right.
because eventually he went with the NBA license, but all the moves, 90% of the moves in the game are probably him.
Yeah, 90%.
No, we had three actors. And then, of course, we put him in as a secret character, and he chose the name Air Morris because, of course, he kind of fancied himself, in Jordan's likeness.
Right, yeah. I mean, January 1st and Will is all you had to remember to be him, so I used him all the time as well.
Yep.
And he was a good player. He was one of the best players you could be.
Yep.
That's awesome. And we have some more players, I think, coming up here. Stephen Howard, another player.
Yeah. Stephen was, a DePaul basketball star. So I, stumbled into the gym at DePaul, found a few guys that, were practicing, playing, and, pulled him aside and, asked him if he wanted to come in and, do a little shoot. And he did. And, he eventually, he did get drafted. He played for the NBA, went to Utah. I think he's a motivational speaker now. And he was an all-around good guy, real smart guy, and did some work for us there for a couple of weeks.
That's awesome. And the last, I think, player I have on here, Tony Scott, for the original jam. I think this is the original jam we're on.
Yeah, Tony was another one of the, the ball players that we found to help, do some moves. And he was another, all-around good guy, nice guy. And, the shooting that we did, it was just, a handful of shoots. He wasn't in the original, first shoot, the first, days. But, over the course of maybe, 6 or 7 days, we probably shot most of this footage. And he was then part of that, in the later stages.
And I think that does it for the original NBA Jam. We're moving on to Tournament Edition now. In the next picture, I took the liberty of a couple extra bonus stock pieces and put the cheerleaders together. Can you talk about Carrie Hoskins, Lorraine, Olivia?
Yeah. Both beautiful girls that we found via contacting Playboy and letting them know that we were looking for some modeling talent to, act as cheerleaders. And so they connected us with these two gals. And, Carrie went on to have a very, distinguished career with Mortal Kombat that I'm sure Sal can talk about.
Yeah, so Carrie also then, after this, became Sonya for Mortal Kombat. For Mortal Kombat, I want to say 3, because she went away for 2. And then continued with other characters as well. That was her main character. And then, continued to work with us. We've been friends for years and continued to work with us on different games, doing motion capture and playing different characters as well. Revolution X, she played, one of the main characters on that as well, and some of our other games. Oh, she even was on Hangtime and Showtime. She was in Showtime as well as a female player.
As soon as Mark said Mortal Kombat, I said, "Is that Sonya Blade? It looks a lot like her," and there she is.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the next guy you alluded to earlier, the creator of Defender, is that right? Eugene Jarvis?
Yeah, I mean, he's the doctor. We call him the doctor. He's, he's probably the most famous, certainly the most famous American game designer.
Yeah.
With going back to Defender and Stargate and Robotron, which is my favorite game of all time. Cruisin' USA. And the list goes on. If you go into an arcade nowadays or a Dave & Buster's, pretty much half of the game inside those locations are coming from his company now. Company is called Raw Thrills. Eugene, engineering background, business background, and has a great game sense. And so we were always leaning on Eugene. And when I say we, I'm talking about like all the teams, Mortal Kombat, Jam. He worked with me on Smash TV, my first point-up game. And he had kind of, he moved out of Midway pretty quickly after, Jam. But certainly throughout this, we were always knocking on his door to say, "Hey, what do you think of this? Look at that." And he always had good insights. So still one of my best friends today.
And he was not wearing that straight jacket when you guys took this picture, right? That was added on later?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I added that on later just to mess around with him.
All right. Moving on to Eric Kincaid.
Yeah, Aaron Kincaid. Yeah, Eric was an artist that came into the company, didn't work on the team exactly, but was an enthusiastic artist who came in. The main thing I remember about Eric is like when he came in, we didn't have the idea of like digital portfolios, so he wanted to show us everything that he did. So he carried his big computer into the company to interview with us and set it all up and is showing us the game that he started to make by himself, programming by himself, but he was an artist. And he showed us the artwork he did and what have you. So a super enthusiastic artist in our group. Always loved coming by to play the game and give us feedback, and just a generally good energy person to have around. He used to like bands like Guar and different kind of alternative bands like that. So we gave him some white eyes as a homage to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can't tell if he was rolling his eyes, and then his coat is dye, so that kind of makes sense with like a death metal vibe. Yeah.
God.
So moving on, this guy seems like a cool guy, Kerry Mednick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just saw Kerry last winter. He's was the engineering manager for the Williams Electronics Valley Midway, coin-op business. And so that means that he had his hands in the hardware development. Sheridan Osler, who we talked about earlier, would report into him, so that kind of the tech group He was there trying to acquire the parts that would go into this custom hardware, whether it be the chips or, monitors or, joysticks. The engineering aspect of the business, he was the manager of it.
Awesome.
Mechanical engineering, not the software engineering.
Okay. How about Rachel Davies, one of two ladies, that we have coming up?
Yeah, Rachel, she was a marketing gal in the coin-op business. And so she worked kind of in the front office. She she's British, right, Sal? Had a thick accent, was a great salesperson for the company.
Yep.
And was always a big supporter of, the teams in the back that were bringing their new games to the shows. And so we were tight, buddies with her. And I don't
One thing we never talk about, Mark, is how we used to travel around with our salespeople a lot to visit distributors, some of the buyers that would purchase big orders of our games. So Mark and different people on the team, Mark and I, though, used to travel around with our salespeople to demonstrate the games for these big buyers to try to get them, enticed, show them everything about it and get them excited about it, kind of thing. And Rachel was one of the people that, used to take us around and.
Yeah, she's great with people, great communicator. I don't know what she's doing. I haven't talked to her in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
She's very photogenic. I mean, you can tell just, some people just exude friendliness.
Oh, yeah.
She certainly does that.
And sales.
And I have a feeling the next one might as well. Linda Deal looks like a very fun lady.
She was involved with dealing with not the operators, but the distributors that would buy these games. And so she was, again, kind of a front office person,
right.
Working on the sales with the marketing people to promote the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think she probably got pulled in at the same time Rachel got pulled in, right, to become a secret character.
Yeah.
So did you guys send out an email to some of the front office people, or was it just pull them in? Like, we'd like you to come in and be in the game.
What email?
Email hasn't been invented yet.
You're right. I can't believe it.
There were no cell phones. There was no email.
Oh my gosh.
Before the internet.
The video game development was probably much more fun before the hundreds of emails you guys probably get a day.
Right. So. Our first email was P-mail, Pegasus mail, but that's a whole different thing.
All right, we'll continue on with Paul Heisch, which I enjoy playing as.
Yep. Paul was a sound engineer as well. He worked alongside with John Hay. Paul was working on other projects, pinball, and I think some other games, but mostly pinball, I think. And Paul played the game a lot, came by and had, gave his feedback, good or bad, about the game, was not afraid to say what his feelings were, and was very animated in doing so a lot. So he and Mark always had good fun bantering back and forth about, the state of things.
Yeah, he's a real Bulls fan, and he would disagree. Now he's not afraid to disagree and say something sucks when he thinks it sucks. But he's a good guy.
Yeah.
And did the photographer, was one of the photographers that took all these shots in the game? Was there one guy taking these headshots? Because Paul, of course, is making this crazy face. I mean, was it just make whatever face you want to have for the
it was game? Me or John. We just turned the video camera on and told everybody to just do whatever they wanted in front of their camera. And then we would just select the shots that we thought were best then. But yeah, John Carlton or I did the capturing of all this.
That's awesome. All right, so the next one we have up is a very famous guy, Ed Boon.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ed, of course, still leading the Mortal Kombat team today. All around good guy, super good instincts on game design. And so we would always, seek out his opinion, similar to the way we did with Eugene. And he wasn't involved. I don't think he did any VO or anything for the game. But again, kind of like George Petro, kind of one of the leaders in the studio. And we wanted to make sure that if he'd be recognized if he wanted to be in the game.
Yeah, he was a wise man of the studio, and we appreciated all of his, input and feedback, help us make a better game.
And super funny.
Yeah.
One thing that I always think about with my hometown arcade, I had what we called the Logan Sport Mall, because I live in Logan Sport, and it had, probably 20 games, and Mortal Kombat 2 and NBA Jam were there at the same time, and of course had like kind of a similar realistic graphics. But I only mentioned that because Noob Saibot I thought was a cool character, where they took the names of Mr. Boone, and we'll move on to Mr. John Tobias. And they reversed the names. I thought that was the coolest character ever that they did that. Now both these guys in NBA Jam.
Yeah, John, he's a great guy. Hired him for Smash TV. And if you think about Smash TV, that was my first coin-op game. It has a lot of violence in it. Similar to how Mortal Kombat ended up. You'd step on a landmine and, there'd be a bloody hole knocked, through your body. You destroy Mutoid Man, and there's, blood coming out of him, a lot of body chunks, flying around. So that was all John doing hand-drawn art, an incredible talent. He eventually then went on to work on Mortal Kombat after we did a couple of games together. So before NBA Jam. And then John actually worked with me for the last 6 or 7 years. Here at my company now, Zynga. He just left, and he's now at Warner Brothers, but still making games today. Great talent, hard worker, and again, even though he wasn't involved in NBA Jam, we wanted to make sure that he was represented.
I'm still waiting for the Smash TV remaster. Because I did love that game, and those phrases still stick with me.
Big money, big prizes. I love it.
And that's something that NBA Jam had too, was those phrases. And one thing that Mr. Boone and Mr. Tobias have is a lightning bolt on their character, which I think is really cool in NBA Jam. So when you play as them in Tournament Edition, you have that lightning bolt.
That's right.
Cool.
Yep, that's right.
All right. Now to the toasty guy, Dan Forden.
Toasty!
Forden.
Yeah, take that, Sal.
Yeah, Dan's another audio guy. And again, just generally, he was working on pinball, I think, during that time, but we got to know him through his work on Mortal Kombat, and came in, just generally a good energy there, good energy at Midway, and, played the game with us and gave us his feedback, but just one of the guys that was we thought was important in the company, and asked him if he would like to be a character in our game, and he did.
Yeah, and still making games today, still working on Mortal Kombat.
And that picture looks like one of the Mortal Kombat pictures they use when he pops up, right?
Yeah, I think it might be.
Which is cool.
The same one.
Which is cool. Now to Al Lasco.
Al was the counterpart to Sheridan, another kind of tech that would help support the teams in terms, wiring and harnesses and joysticks and EPROMs, and just another guy, kind of making the studio tick. Good guy.
Awesome. Now we go to a guy that I love his look, Roger Sharp.
Yeah, I just had a birthday this week. I just saluted him. Roger was the head of licensing. And so the relationship with the NBA went directly, through him. He was the one that would talk to them and, gather our, input, our data, our pictures, our videos, to, lobby with them. And so while he wasn't, on the development team, so to speak, he was instrumental in, the activities of the entire company, really, because if you think about that era, it's when licensing began on pinball machines as well. And so he was in the midst of all that.
Best mustache in the whole group of pictures, I believe.
Yeah, he looks the same. He looks the same now.
Awesome. All right, we're moving on to Raymond Gay.
I think he was part of the like when we would buy 10,000 chips or 10,000 wiring harnesses. Back in those days, it was like big spreadsheets of number crunching and trying to get things for a penny less and trying to get cabinets built more cheaply. So I think he was on that kind of procurement kind of side of the business.
We saw him pretty much every day walking through the office, and at one point we just offered him, because he was somebody who was important to our company. Again, we weren't that many there. We asked him just come on in and be a part of it.
That is awesome. Okay, we're going to Jim Green.
One of my favorite guys, but go ahead, Sal. Talk about Jim.
Yeah, Jim was a guy, and I don't remember his exact role, but he was involved with PR, I believe. I'm not sure. But Jim had a really good energy about him. We were actually really good friends and took a trip on vacation with a bunch of guys, including Jim, at one point, which is a whole other story, Mexico. And but Jim was a guy who I think brought a lot of energy to the company, had a lot of insight for just how to promote something, how to make something look better to distributors and people outside of our company. So he was a good, maybe external liaison for us at Midway.
Yeah, he was, worked with marketing, but he was basically in charge of setting up the trade shows.
Right.
There were 2 trade shows every year for the coin-op business. And, of course, it takes a lot of logistics and management to put these trade shows together and get everything out there and the booth and then, of course, working with the teams to get all the content there. So he was kind of on the marketing side for the company.
That's awesome. And he looks like most likely to start in his own sitcom in the 90s. He kind of has that Mad About You kind of look about him or something. So I'll move on to Pat Cox. Cool looking guy.
Yeah, Pat worked for Kerry Mednick on the engineering side. So he was another hardware guy that would work on, assembling, because these were custom boards, custom I/O chips and audio boards, and of course a custom processor and the memory. And so he was on the fairly small team. I mean, maybe 5 or 6 people that designed the hardware.
That's awesome. Next on the list is a guy with a great look, John Vogel.
John Vogel is an artist that worked on Mortal Kombat. He had done other games, but he was working on Mortal Kombat at the time. And John, we were all friends there together. John actually gave me a lot of insight when I first got to Midway, showed me a lot of his techniques for digitizing stuff as well, model parts and pieces to build realistic looking things, but not with real world items, or not with real scale items. He would shoot model photography and then take that and build textures and build objects with those smaller objects and make them look larger than they really are. John was also responsible for animating Goro for Mortal Kombat with John Tobias. They both did a lot of that.
And he still works on Mortal Kombat today.
Still works on Mortal Kombat today. John and I are still friends. He's a really good digital innovator as well. And he was one of the innovators at Midway at the time with the art look, moving the art look forward for Midway.
John Lowe's.
Yeah, John was involved on the hardware side. One of those 5 or 6 guys that were responsible for putting this, the actual boards together. Not the cabinets, but the boards.
That's awesome that you get these unsung heroes kind of, that are building the kind of hardware part of it
Right.
into the game as well. That's pretty awesome. This next guy I saw on a Microsoft, when they did their little reveal recently, Matt Booty.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, he's a good buddy of ours. He's a real rock star. He went on. He was a sound engineer at this stage. So much like John Hay or Paul Heitch that you saw earlier, he went on to become the head of the development. He ran the studio, and then he eventually became president of Midway. He left to go to Microsoft, and he is now in charge of software development on the console side for Microsoft. He ran the Minecraft team for a time. So he's an amazing manager, leader, and funny guy, super engaged, knows how to program, photographer. I mean, he's really special.
Yeah, it was awesome to see him on the Microsoft reveal just a few days ago and think of this picture, because this picture is such a classic out of all the pictures. All right.
Mark Pinacho.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. He was a programmer at Midway and a good friend of ours. He was mostly started off as a pinball programmer, as many of the guys did, as did Ed and many other people. And most everybody, like even Matt, I think, started off doing pinball as well. But Mark was a pinball programmer who came over to the game side and worked on several different games, arcade games, including a game called Judge Dredd, which never quite made it out, but it was actually really close to getting done. And just overall was a good support person for our groups, our company there, and just a generally good person to have around.
Next, we have, I think his name's Larry DeBar, but Cam is his in-game name, so I'm not sure who this guy is.
Yeah, it's DeMar, D-E-M-A-R. Larry. Yeah, Larry's Eugene's partner on the early era of those coin-op games, Defender, Stargate, Robotron. He pinball guru, engineer. Eventually left Williams, started his own company. I think he just retired this year. He's had a lot of success. Cam, I believe, was his wife's name at the time, if I recall. There's something connected with that. So while he didn't work on the game, again, we held him in high regard.
Awesome. Mystery solved on the name not matching the in-game name. All right, we'll move on to Bill Dabblestein.
Bill Dabblestein, another engineer we were friends with. We hung out a lot, and he helped out and worked on many of our different games. Worked with George Petro and Jack Hager, who I'm not sure has shown up yet, but those guys ran a team that Bill worked on. And so again, he was just a good overall person, and thought we'd let him have his head in the game if he wanted it there.
I feel like he's one of the guys with a hat on in the game, maybe.
Right.
If I remember correctly, which is pretty cool, to have that extra hat like we talked about.
Yep. Yeah. After Sheridan, that's when all the hats started showing up for.
Right. How about is that Martin Martinez?
Yep. Martin Martinez. Marty and I started on the same day, I want to say, way back then. And Marty was also an artist on the team. He worked there for a few years, and I'm not sure exactly what he was working on while we were on Jam, but I think he was helping out. He was helping out with the same team that Bill Dabblestein and Jack Hager and another person that we're going to see next was working on. So just one of our artists in the group there.
Awesome. You alluded to Steve Baran?
Yeah, Steve Baran. And I think Steve and Marty and I all started the same day at Midway. So Steve is also an artist, and Steve went on to work on Mortal Kombat very early on. He was helping out with something else first, but Steve has been the lead character artist for Mortal Kombat for the last 15, 18 years.
Still today, yeah.
Still today.
That's awesome. All right, going to Joe Linhoff.
Joe is an engineer that was working with George Petro on a game, and he's the first engineer in the studio that started making 3D games. So he was real smart, real clever, and so while he didn't end up I think shipping those early games that were 3D, he was kind of a pioneer there. And again, we just kind of gave him the nod.
Awesome. Next guy is Ray Masika.
Yeah, he was another kind of hardware guy in the mix.
Yeah.
That he kind of straddled a little bit between Sheridan and Carey. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of on the support side as well as the engineering mechanical side there.
Yep. And everybody, they didn't just work on arcades, or were they just working on arcades at that time? I thought they were also supporting pinball at times.
No, not really. Yeah.
And now you've mentioned this guy, Jack Hager, up next.
Yeah, Jack was like our king vampire artist there. He was the art guru. He was basically we looked up to him as our lead for the studio before it got splintered off into different groups. But Jack was one of the major, most experienced people on the art side, and an amazingly talented person, an amazingly creative person, and had just has a great history of games before then. Designed the Amiga. If you remember the Amiga home computer, he was one of the original designers. His signature is actually, one of the signatures on the inside of the Amiga case, if you know what that is. But yeah, Jack was a great person. He was the one who hired me at Midway.
He looks like a mischievous but fun guy. He's got that look on his face here for the picture.
Yeah, real good guy.
How about Jake Simpson?
Another engineer. He wasn't really instrumental on the NBA Jam type efforts, but I think he did actually come in, toward the very end. Maybe helped a little bit. I don't recall what he maybe picked off, but another engineer in the building that we gave the nod to.
Yeah, I don't think he worked with us on Jam or Hangtime, but I think he worked with us on WrestleMania, and then he was working on his own games before that. Yeah,
I can't recall. I think he might have touched something, or he tried to improve some UI or something.
Yeah.
Now this guy has one of the greatest pictures, Mr. Jason Skiles.
Yeah.
Has that white hat.
Yeah, Jason, engineer. He was kind of young, right out of school, real sharp, and had a real flair to him. He's still in the business today.
Yeah, and Jason, I remember, was really critical on Blitz, where he was one of the major engineers implementing a lot of our animations into the game with one of our 3D animators, and designing functions and systems, and
totally key on Blitz.
Yeah. But he just came on, I think, to the company at the end, because I think we started Blitz right after this, didn't we, Mark? After Hangtime? Or
yeah.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, WrestleMania. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because Jason was on WrestleMania as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, we'll move on to Mark Lafredo, which looks like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the guru. He's the chief hardware designer. I've talked about Kerry, Mednick. We looked at some of the other guys, Pat Cox, Ray Masica just went by. But Mark Lafredo was, still is, a hardware genius, creating the chips, sending the chips out to get manufactured, keeping things moving fast, Sprite engines, 3D engines. And so he's tight. He was tight with Eugene, Eugene being the jack of all trades, business, hardware, software, game design. He worked very closely with Eugene to craft the tech. Real funny guy, really engaging. Just saw him last winter, and I'm sure Sal's got a lot of good stories about Mark.
Yeah, too many to tell here, but one of the personalities that made Midway though. Like when I think about Midway, I think about Mark as one of the key memories of Midway being what it was.
And also one of the best faces in Tournament Edition for sure. Oh, yeah. That pose. How about Chris Granner?
Yeah, Chris Granner, another sound engineer at Midway. Again, pinball transitioning and helping out on arcade games when he could.
Yeah, I still work with Chris every day. He just did a good sound effect for me a couple days ago, and so he's another long-term video game guy, and works with me here at Zynga.
That's awesome. How about Joe Dillon?
Joe was the boss of marketing. So the few marketing folks that we saw in here earlier all reported into him. So he was the guy that was deciding many to manufacture, talking to the distributors, talking to operators, trying to gauge the price point, was a long-term coin-op marketing guy.
Yeah, and most importantly, he had relationships with a lot of people. Like he knew them from years back and could I don't want to say muscle them, but basically he'd talk straight with them. He'd talk, hey, let's do this thing here. Let's do this deal. So that, obviously helps in moving units too.
All right, let's move on to a guy doing a documentary, right? Josh Sway?
Yep. Yeah, good buddy of ours. He came in during the development there of NBA Jam, did some work on the crowd, the advertising signboards on the back of the court. He did, art for that. I think Peking Palace is a family restaurant, over in Michigan, he put in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then he went on to work with us, on the WrestleMania product, and eventually started his own company with John Tobias. So he's definitely been in the mix on a lot of the history of Midway there, and his new documentary film. I'm looking forward to seing.
Insert coin. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's it's a big. He did a lot of work on it. I think it's like a big tribute to Eugene Jarvis because again we all kind of revolved around Eugene, and so it kind of started as a hey, look at these look at these great games that came out in that era, but the real story was Eugene. That's where everything kind of spun from.
I think in the last day or so, Josh posted on his social media for Insert Coin a picture of the empty wrestling ring and says the who's who of Midway is back in the crowd there. And he just has the whole crowd of you guys back in there. So that's worth taking a look at. I'll probably bring it up on the screen so people can take a look. Very, very cool. Now we go to Vince Ponarelli, which is a pretty cool looking guy.
Yeah, Vince is a friend of ours, very talented musician and sound person as well. But, his main thing was he can play guitar, he plays great instruments, and brought this quality of sound now to Midway music for pinball, for arcade games that we had not heard before. The other sound engineers were good sound artists, but Vince could play, guitar, so it gave a different sound to everything, and then learned how to like incorporate all that. And now works on I think at 2K Sports, doing like all the wrestling games there, and doing helping out with the thing that John Hay pioneered, which is all the splicing of names and audio and phrases and making things sound seamless. So Vince is all of that.
Excellent. How about Warren Davis?
Warren, the engineer behind the Q*bert video game. He's an actor out in Hollywood. All around good guy. He had left, he left Williams right around that time, but he worked on the Narc game with Eugene and George and Jack Hager and Newcomer, and so we just gave him the nod. All
right, Paul Barker.
Paul's an artist. He started off, I think he was in pinball at the time, or maybe he was just transitioning over to the arcade section. But Paul was an artist, a 2D artist mostly, a graphics designer. So we didn't have a lot of experience working with Paul at this time, but after that, Paul worked with us on MLB Slugfest and did a lot of the graphics of the UI and the graphic design of Slugfest.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to Jim Gentile.
Yeah, Jim Gentile.
Oh.
He'd been at Midway for a while, I think, before me, and was an artist as well. He's a hand-drawing artist and also then became an animator, 3D animator after this. But yeah, Jim was working on other games at the time, but again, was a good person. I think he had worked with Mark before. Did he work with you on?
Yeah, he did a little bit of work on, Smash TV in the beginning. And I see, he's still in the business doing mocap shoots. He became a real kind of guru at mocap over the years with Midway. A lot of the games would funnel through his efforts in the studio.
Now, we're wrapping up Tournament Edition, so I just have some kind of closing slides here. This is a list of all the NBA players that you could put in their initials in Tournament Edition and get them. How did you pick those guys out? It's just maybe a handful of guys here.
I think it was just an interesting idea to take some of the key players and let them be, superstars that you might want to put on your other team.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a way to kind of mix up the teams a little bit if you knew the secrets.
That's awesome. And the last little thing I have are people that are not on my one-up arcade cabinet that I have, but there's like Tim Coleman. I think he had like a gas mask on. Elvicious, Congo, Grim Reaper, and the Mortal Kombat guys. Any stories about those guys? They must have been added later in later versions.
Well, this is all Tournament Edition.
Yep.
Tim was an artist in the studio. I think he left around that time. He was on a couple of other projects. The Grim Reaper, Congo, we started getting into the masks.
Yeah. I started experimenting with special characters and interesting looking, creatures. And went to a Halloween store and just bought a bunch of masks, and we were experimenting with wearing masks and what that might look like on characters playing basketball.
I believe Congo ends up in the Hangtime as one of the heads you can use. What about Elvicious? When I don't have the picture here, but it was like a guy with a big nose. It looked like kind of a doctored mask.
Yeah.
Was that Sheridan? I think that might have been Sheridan somehow.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, guys, for joining us. We've been through NBA Jam, the original, and NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and I hope you guys will come back and join me for a Hangtime Edition where things, I've heard, get really crazy.
Yeah, that'd be great. We have a lot of good stories from Hangtime, a lot of good costumes. That game got even better from a tuning standpoint, and team fire, all that kind of stuff. But this was a lot of fun, David. Really creative conversation, thinking about all these secret characters. It's good memories for Sal and I.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for our comprehensive coverage of NBA Jam and NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Great stories. Thank you again to Mark and Sal for joining me. And we'll see you for the next video about Hangtime.